We are dancing in the discomfort zone today with Henna Pryor, author, speaker, and workplace performance expert. Henna, how are you today?
Great. Always happy to see you. You always brighten my day. Your hair, your clothes, I love it.
It's just the hair, really.
It's all, it counts.
Well, I was excited to talk to you, A, because you're like a really cool person, but you've been through some career pivots. And I think
Hmm.
this is something, especially these days, as people look at the world and everything's changing and, they start thinking, well, I may want to do something a little bit different. I thought it would be great to talk a little bit about your career path, where you are now, because I think also your area of expertise now is also really valuable to people, talking a little bit about being awkward and that
Hmm.
signal gap and what's going on with
Yes.
that. So
Yeah.
start with your story. Tell just a little bit about how you got here.
Yes. So you mentioned I'm a woman of pivots. So my undergrad degree was in finance, and then I got a master's in accounting. So my first job out of college was at EY. I worked in a big four public accounting firm, just immigrant parents. That was a nice, safe name brand company, and met some of my best friends in the world there. Short story short. I hated it. I'm really not of the personality to be an auditor for a living, but I was good at math. And so we did that for a few years, worked very long hours, and, generally did not enjoy the work. So finally, about 3 years into that career, I said, oh, good. I need to do something else with my life. And the idea of making a total, 180 to 360 degree, some sort of general shift out was not appealing. I think that's scary for a lot of people. So that led to pivot number one. And pivot number one looked something like this. What jobs exist that leverage the skills that I've already built, but help me lean into some of the stuff that I actually like about my existing job? And so what I liked about being an auditor was I did get to talk to clients. I did get to have some, person to person interaction. Every time I did that, that was my favorite part of the job. I did not like ticking and tying. I did not like being in there with my calculator and my, keypad and the numbers. So I found myself in executive search and staffing, which was a 100% commissions job, but at first focused on the finance and accounting industry. So I was using my industry knowledge that I had built, but in this new way. I was 100% commissions. I essentially moved into sales, was like, oh, this is fun. This is way more fun. It was scarier because it was commissions, but it was way more fun. I found this new use of my skill set. Fast forward 14 years later, I did that for 14 years, loved it, and felt like I had outgrown it. It was a little bit different than accounting. Accounting, I was like, I don't really like this. This one was, I just felt like I had outgrown it, which led to pivot number two. And I went through the same process. I said, okay, what do I like about this job? What's useful? I like talking to people. I like the advisory part of this job. So I got executive coaching certified. I thought I'm going to build an executive coaching practice. I'm going to try on entrepreneurship. That's what I did. And within short order, coaching turned into, can you do this with my team? Can you do this with my group? Now I'm a keynote speaker first and foremost. So those are the two major pivots of my life, with little pivots along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's I love your process where you were like, okay, what
Mhm.
do I love about this job? And how can I move that into the next thing? And I think that's such an important self-awareness piece to say, why am I shifting? What do I like that I want to take with me?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this, dreamy idea of, I hate my job, I'm just going to open a bar in the Caribbean, right? Or whatever the joke, the job. I know it sounds great to me, but I
Right?
think for many of us, that's unrealistic, right? Some of us do have some, responsibility around what, bills being paid, or having something that feels somewhat stable under our feet that's rooted in something. So as much as that's a fun thing to say out loud, to dream out loud, for most of us, not all, but for most of us, that feels a little unrealistic. So it feels like a more fruitful exercise to say, okay, how do I take the best of and move it, shimmy it, uncomfortably and through stumbles over here, and see what lands. I think that's what it feels like for most of us.
Yeah. And I love the concept of shimmy and
Yeah.
discomfort. Like, I mean, here we are dancing in the discomfort
Yes.
zone.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't know if you did that
Yeah.
on purpose, but you
No,
get 14
for sure.
years.
I wasn't marching confidently into these pivots. Let's be clear. I was stumbling, shimmying, and crossing my fingers in front of me and behind my back. I was like, let's see what this is.
Well, and it sounds like you kind of eased your way into the speaking thing. Like that wasn't the original plan after you
No.
moved with the staffing to the coaching. You just kind of ended up in the speaking.
Yeah, I think I don't know many people, save for those who maybe started in the youth market, that knew professional speaking was a career when we were younger. I think most of us who grew up in a certain decade, that wasn't on the list of professions when we were in elementary school, professional speaker. Correct. No, doctor, and I have immigrant parents. So it was really doctor, lawyer, engineer were my three options. And I went rogue and went accounting. But professional speaker was not on the list. I think, like many things, part of what makes pivoting or experimentation beautiful is slowly planting seeds. And so executive coaching felt more adjacent to my executive search and staffing. I was working with leaders. I was partnering with them closely as an advisor. And so executive coaching felt like, a 90-degree turn from that work. And a 90-degree turn felt more comfortable for me while still being just a little bit uncomfortable, right? So that felt right. And it was only through playing in that space did the profession start to crack open, and for me to actually see clearly even the same thing on a smaller scale. What parts of this do I actually love the most? And then, slowly trying other things on for size. And that's where speaking sort of slowly and organically became the focus.
I love it. And what do you speak on now?
Yes. Okay. So now workplace performance. I like to say I have two lanes: mental fitness in the workplace and social fitness in the workplace. So mindset skills, personal growth, embracing difficult emotions like awkwardness and turning them into our assets. And then the social fitness side is influence communication. How do we take all that internal work we've done and express it in a way that it's actually received and received well?
Yeah. Well, let's start on the mental fitness side, because this is where, when I first learned about you and what you speak on and everything, this whole awkward piece. And so many of us are like, I'm so awkward. This is such an awkward situation. Everything feels awkward, which is we dance in the discomfort zone. That's what it feels like. So talk a little bit about your perspective on awkward.
Yes. I think a lot of people misunderstand what it is and how it differs from, let's just say, discomfort on the whole. So awkwardness is a form of social discomfort. It is a form of discomfort, but it has a few unique qualities to it that differentiate it from just the be uncomfortable conversation. So awkwardness, again, it is a social emotion, meaning you don't tend to feel it by yourself. If you're working from home and you are, rehearsing something and you mess up, if you were walking to the kitchen, you trip over your own 2 feet, you might be like, oh boy, I'm clumsy, but you don't feel awkward about it, because no one is there to be witness to that moment. Awkwardness is a social emotion. We feel it in front of others, similar to embarrassment, or as the youth now say, cringe. Right? These are social emotions. So that's one element. The other is that it is a form of what we call private self-consciousness. So this awkwardness emotion sits under a bucket of human social behavior called self-consciousness, which is sort of, what do other people think? We use this emotion as a signal to help us evaluate, how do other people perceive me? Are we meeting social norms? So what I really like to start with is this. If you are a person who, am I allowed to use colorful language? Lightly? Okay.
Yeah.
If you are a person, not the big word, yeah. But if you are a person who wants to leave a mark that's worth any bit of damn in this world, you are going to have moments where people perceive you as cringe. You are going to have moments where you feel awkward, because these emotions exist when we are worried about violating a social norm. And I have to ask this: who do you know that stands out in their market, who nicely and neatly fits into every social norm? No one.
Nobody.
No one. No one who stands out in your mind has safely played by every single rule and every single norm. So if you're trying to do anything that helps you stand out, this is an emotion that you need to get comfortable with. And I would say befriend, not run away from.
Do that. I mean, it's that voice in your head that's constantly going, everybody's looking at you. Oh my God, your hair is weird. Oh my God, I can't believe you're wearing that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe, you're speaking on that, or you're asking for that job or whatever. I mean, that voice just keeps going to remind us that we're not in the box right now. I'm not in the box. I'm not. Help. So how do you recommend people do that?
Yeah, a few different ways. And then I'll actually share a very recent example. This happened to me the other day. We always have to learn what we teach, right? But the first thing is to really catch and examine the stories we tell around this emotion. So often, first things first, we amplify. We're like, everyone is staring at me. Everyone thinks I'm an idiot, right? We know from years and years of research, Elliot Aronson refers to the pratfall effect, which is sort of these little things that we do actually don't tend to make us look incompetent or inept. They just tend to humanize us. They're not that big a deal. They actually make us a bit more likable. We also know about Tom Gilovich from Cornell talks about the spotlight effect, which is people are not looking at us nearly as intensely as we think they are. So just really level setting to the amount of reality versus our own perception of the story. That person isn't getting back to me because they think I'm an idiot. Or that person isn't getting back to you because, like you, they're swimming in it, right? They're drowning. We tend to tell ourselves stories. So catching our stories is number one. And potentially more importantly in this moment, after you've done that pre-work, number two is actually having a set of strategies in the moment to cope when those moments come, to have a comeback rate strategy. So I teach people, you are not going to avoid an awkward moment. You are going to step in it. Awkwardness exists in uncertainty. But what you can chisel and sharpen is your comeback rate, is your recovery rate. When it happens, what are you going to do? Usually what you're going to do is naming it. Oh boy, I feel extremely embarrassed about that right now. That was awkward. I'm so sorry. Can we try that again? When you actually name it, it diffuses it. You can strategically use humor, right? And there's some talk tracks that we can talk about. But can I give you an example, Anne, that happened to me just this week? I'm still thinking about this and slightly mortified, but I had to practice what I preach. So I was speaking at a conference. I was there for 2 days. So I'd gotten in the night before. And the night before, there was a big welcome reception, right? It was outside. There was all this, kind of music playing. I could hear it into the night from my hotel room. I get on an elevator with a gentleman the next day. And, I say, hey, good morning. How are you doing? And he kind of in a scraggly voice says, doing okay. How are you doing? And I say, oh, late night last night, right? You went out last night? And he says, no, recovering from throat cancer. And my whole body is like, oh God, right? Foot in mouth. And so again, past henna would have not only turned bright red and hot as a beet, which I got a little warm, yes, but I also would have frozen and just been like, never open your mouth again. Like, why would you speak on this earth if things like that come out? But again, being someone who has trained myself on this, I looked him square in the eye and I said, oh, that's embarrassing. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. My name is Henna. It's nice to meet you. I promise I'm a little more careful usually when I speak to humans, right? And so I owned it, I named it, and I use a little bit of humor, right? I typically know how to speak to humans in a way that doesn't sound like that. He laughed, I laughed, our shoulders dropped. Actually, he saw me later in the halls that day and we kind of, shared like a smile. It was it became a connective moment that had the potential to make me feel like a jerk all day. And so these are our opportunities, right? These small opportunities to get better at those comeback rates in the moment.
The naming it is so like, oh, that's awkward. I am so sorry. Just being able to say it, diffuse it, and just whoop, okay, we're moving along. It's the best we can do because we're all going to mess up at some point, right? We're all going to have that foot in the mouth moment.
I mean, as much as we try to avoid it, we try. And again, it's an emotion that exists inside of uncertainty. So an ironic truth, I think one of my favorite truths about that emotion in particular is the avoidance of awkwardness actually increases it. So if I didn't say anything and just had this big old silence, it actually would have made it worse. Now, getting good at maintaining awkward silences strategically in some spaces is actually a very powerful thing that we can get better at. But in moments like that, recovery and ownership actually really helps a perception of confidence. I think he looked at me as a much more confident communicator as a result of that interaction.
Right, because you'd already messed it up. If he was going to think something
Correct.
negative about you, that had already been.
I already hit it out of the park. Yeah, yes.
You're like, I already won. Make it any worse at that point. You might
Correct.
as well try to recover and apologize and recognize that. Wow, that was insensitive. I'm sorry. There was a party blaring downstairs. I made an assumption. Yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm usually better at talking to humans. I love that line.
Yeah. Well, and in this moment of everything being so smooth and so synthetic, I know people feel like it's a platitude when I say this, those little moments of humanity are incredibly connective when we use them correctly. He's the one person from the conference. I saw others in the hallway and said hello, but it was almost like we were bonded. We had this little inside joke between us. And again, I'll be honest, Anne, it was a moment where I was like, I cannot believe. And somehow he was my best friend at the conference because we had that shared moment. So it's refreshing if we handle them in a way that is intentional and helpful.
Yeah, and I think that if you had been like, "Oh, yeah, sorry," and then, rode the elevator, slowest elevator of your life, then you would have awkwardly ignored each
Yes.
other the entire time. Like, wow, she's,
Yes.
yeah. I
Yes.
love that. And that's so important. I mean, and that was a small, and I don't want to say low stakes, but it was a low stakes relationship. You don't have to work with him. You're not married to him. You're not, but it made such a difference. And so when we think about those higher stakes relationships, it's it's an even bigger piece because that yuck is going to fester and amplify within the interaction.
Right. I'm so glad you said that. I think such a huge part of embracing this emotion and getting better at it is the willingness to not just stay in those low stakes moments, but actually create them. And so this is going to sound unhinged to some from certain generations and completely logical to others. Those of us, I was born in 1982. I turned 44 in a few weeks. I grew up not having all of the technological conveniences. And so, asking the server for the lemon that they forgot for my water, no big deal. Calling an establishment, no big deal. I have teenage kids. Now, I recognize that teenagers are not yet the workforce entry level, but they will be very soon, who struggle to call Pliables and say, I don't want coconut on my bowl, because they are used to just being able to opt out on DoorDash. But recently that option wasn't there, and my son had to do the Herculean effort of calling. And again, I try not to, it's easy to make fun of them and joke about it, but the reality is there's a generation of folks for whom this is not required of them. Making eye contact with the grocery checkout person and saying, how's your day? How have you been today? It's not something they always have to do if on the weekends they're Instacarting their order to their home. And so creating opportunities for these social repetitions, these social push-ups, is a low stakes way to strengthen the muscle. I know you don't have to, but can you anyway, in the spirit of preparing for the higher stakes moments?
I love that. And that's what my whole TED talks about is going for that low stakes discomfort. So when the big stuff comes, you have a little bit better, ability to handle it. Because if we're avoiding making eye contact with the person making our coffee at Starbucks, like, we don't have a chance with our boss when we mess up big with a client and we have to, pay the piper.
Correct. And unfortunately, more than ever, we can't predict other people, right? And so the best you can do is have your own game plan for when the person across from you is unpredictable. If they don't make eye contact with you back, I don't want you to feel awkward about it. You can't control them, but you can control you. What is your strategy? Maybe you try again with humor. Maybe you don't tell yourself a story afterward, right? But that's all we can control at this point.
And that story is such a huge thing. And that kind of, I think, leads into your new book. When's the single gap coming out?
So October 6th is what we're targeting right now. So pretty soon here in the scheme of things. And, this is where we shift from our internal experience and the internal emotion to the outward expression. And what we're really exploring in this book is believability. So right now we live in the age of doubt. People do not believe anything. Pew Research just came out, actually, since we last met, Anne. Pew Research came out with a study that says, we know this already, but trust is at an all-time low globally. 55% of Americans do not trust you by default.
Exactly. Just
full stop.
Default. Yep.
Full stop. So skepticism is our default. More than half of us do not trust by default. When I work with sales teams, I say, complete this sentence. Trust, then blank. Do you know the end of that? Do you know what people used to say in sales? Trust, then verify. That used to be the little tagline. Not anymore. Now it's verify, then trust. We live in the verification first era. So if people are trying to be more influential in their communication, part one is we need this humanity element where we're not smoothed and polished and AI'd to oblivion. But then now part two is we actually need to put a huge emphasis and lens on believability as a function of communication and influence, because people don't believe you by default. And that's what we're exploring in the second book.
Ugh. So what is the signal gap?
Mhm. The signal gap speaks to this idea that oftentimes people, sometimes on purpose and sometimes without realizing it, have a differentiation, a gap between the message that they're trying to convey to others and then their tone, behavior, or signals over time. So I'll give you the easy, low-hanging example. The easy, low-hanging example, frankly, the thing that got me to start researching this from all sides in the first place was, and I think we talked about this in the past, you and I, Anne, is when people will use AI to write a LinkedIn post, for example, and it doesn't sound like them. They don't normally use words like that. Okay, maybe they can get away with it once, but here's where things start to break apart in spectacular fashion. I ask that person, or someone asks that person about that thing the next day, and all of a sudden their mouth is writing checks, or I'm sorry, their posts are writing checks that their mouth can't cash, right? Their mouth can't keep up with what it is they said because they don't even remember. They can't use the same words. Now, again, this is the important bit. You can get away with stuff like this once, twice, maybe 3 times. But over time, people are going to feel that this is the phrase everybody uses right now. They're going to feel that something is off.
Huh?
That's what everybody says right now. Something is off. What's happening is there's a signal gap. Your signals are not staying in integrity. There's something about the way you typically are and the way that you're showing up, or that you're creating a message in this moment, that is misaligned. And remember, we're in the skepticism first era. Trust is at an all-time low default. We do not give many second chances, right? That's an AI version, but we're also exploring, there's communication incongruence, there's identity incongruence, there's contextual incongruence. So we're actually exploring it from 8 different angles. Today, more than ever, if you're trying to be influential, it is falling apart at the very beginning when these gaps don't align. And we're starting to bring some more attention to what the heck does off mean? Let's actually diagnose this so that you don't fall into this trap, either on purpose or, more importantly, by accident.
And do you think people are getting more intuitive? Because it's that intuitive thing. I haven't analyzed it. I haven't made a spreadsheet and said, well, today she said this, but then she said this. And it's more just trusting that, whoa, something's not right. And again, when I already don't trust you and I'm looking for reasons to trust you, that feeling, I mean, do you think people are just more intuitive?
There's intuition, but it's actually, so, sometimes people are like, Henna, is this woo adjacent? And I said, it's adjacent, but it's actually scientifically grounded. So let me give you an actual example. Woo adjacent. So here's a great scientific example. They actually have done numerous studies in the arts on this. So if you had a synthetic drum machine, so for those who don't know, a synthetic drum machine is a computerized drum machine who theoretically is making perfect drum beats. It's perfect. It's coming from a computer. And then you have a human drummer who drums perfectly. They don't make a single error. Most musicians, and in fact, most normal people who just enjoy music, can tell the difference. Why? Because there's something in the human version that's referred to as flawed inconsistency. It's like hairline things that a human does that actually makes us feel this version feels a little more alive. Right? It's hairline. They did a similar study on Jackson Pollock paintings. So like forgeries versus the real thing. From a distance or from afar, we might be like, oh, it's the same thing. But there's something that, again, is barely perceptible that humans are like, there's an aliveness there. And so this hairline little cues, people are, what you're referring to as intuition is actually very scientifically grounded at a cellular level, that we actually are in tune for these things in one-offs, but more importantly, in pattern. So the phrase I refer to in the book is, to solve for the signal gap, we need to prioritize signal integrity. Signal integrity over time is what creates congruence. So this is why I say you could probably get away with the AI post 1 time, even 2 times. But if over and over you're using that strategy and then on a podcast you sound nothing like that, the pattern is where you will get caught for sure. You might get away with it here and there, but over time we're going to be like, something is off, right? And we cannot afford that, not in this market.
How then do we, as the humans who are trying to be believable and build that trust from a very genuine, authentic place, how do we make sure that our signal is congruent with ever congruent?
Yeah, no. So there's yes, yeah, yeah. There's a bunch of different strategies. So again, we're going to talk about 8 layers of congruence, but I'll give you just, two easy examples from two of the categories. So let's just use the AI one for example. This one's pretty simple. The simplest one is read what you wrote out loud. Would you ever sound like that?
Yeah, right.
Would a person who knows you well say, that sounds like something you would say, or that sounds like your voice, right? If it doesn't, keep working on it. I'm not anti-AI. I use it all the time as a brainstorming partner, as a sparring partner, poke holes in my idea. I love it. And especially if you're in any sort of thought leader, external visibility space, your voice is extremely important. I know a bunch of people who are like, I just, skim past those AI written posts, right? If this matters to you, if differentiation, maybe it doesn't matter to you, but if it matters to you, think about, would I ever say this out loud? And the easiest way to test for that is read it. Read it out loud and hear yourself. That's one example of how we can, catch ourselves. Another really fun example that I'm actually deciding if I'm going to open the chapter with it or the book actually comes from one of our CSP colleagues, Dan Gingiss. So he gave me a great example of what I, in the book, I'm calling the communication vertical, the communication congruence. I can give you all the times people get it wrong, right? The get it wrong can be the leader who says people first, and then let's schedule a 7:30 a.m. quick sync after a brutal meeting. Communication incongruence. But let me give you a great example of communication congruence that Dan told me. So Dan went to the Sphere and, got a beverage, it was a concert or something, got a water bottle. And you know how when you go to a kiosk or a vendor, they now have the tablets, the squares that they sort of turn around for payment. And he said, what does everybody say when they turn around that thing for payment? They say, it's going to ask you a few questions. And he said, this person said something I've never heard anybody say before. They said, he turned it around and they said, it's going to ask you for a tip. Tipping is optional, but greatly appreciated. Dan said, first time I think in my life I gave a tip, because everybody else tries to be like, it's going to ask you a few questions. Like, it's so icky. It makes us all feel icky because we know what it is. And somebody just was congruent with the thing. They weren't pretending they didn't know. They just, and so there's so many, that's like a silly version, but there's so many versions of that in the workplace where if we just found a way to say what it was that we actually wanted to say, not only, I would buy another thing from that guy just because he was so honest and aligned with what he said. We miss opportunities to do that all the time, and people increasingly can feel it.
Yeah, and it's exactly the same thing as you in the elevator. It's calling
Yes.
out the uncomfortable moment,
Right.
Of saying,
Right.
okay, well, this is going to be weird. Hey, we got it. You're going to have an opportunity to make a tip. You don't have to. I'd love it if you did. I got a
Right.
dog at home who needs, new booties for the snow that's coming.
Yeah.
And just calling out that moment and being in it and making it okay, kind of.
Yeah, there's so many little ways that we do this where we create that incongruence or that gap. And so I think part of the work is about bringing them to light, right? Like we don't even realize we do it. It's from a fear-based place. It's from a discomfort place. It's from an awkwardness place of, oh, I don't want to fish for a tip. But instead, you're playing this game that we all know. We know what it says. We've been doing this a while, right? We know how refreshing for someone to just be aligned in the moment. And how does that affect our trust and our influence? Immeasurably, because we're like, well, this person's not dancing around this. I could probably trust them with other things too, right? And this is an opportunity we cannot miss. So hopefully people will have a lot more, oh my gosh, moments when they start to recognize what's actually happening here.
It gives permission to be that open and honest and tactful and respectful, but it gives that permission to say, we can be okay in the awkward.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then hopefully it role models for other people to be able to be like, yeah, okay, cool. This is uncomfortable too, or whatever, I mean, and then being in it.
So many people worry about, if I'm this honest, or if I give people this much information, or if I really tell them what's going on, will it backfire? And the word that I hear over and over and over when they actually, consider these contextual clues and they start to align them and become aware of these gaps, the word I keep hearing in the research and in interviewing people is, it's so refreshing. Mm-hmm. Refreshing is the word I keep hearing. And I'm thinking, my goodness, our baseline has gotten so low. Just being a bit more believable now is refreshing. So I see it. I'm inspired by it because I see it as such an opportunity to, authenticity is very important. Persuasion has its place, but I see this as an opportunity to really hang our hats on something that we are losing that is preventable loss. We don't need to be losing this believability on the front end if we just bring some awareness and some strategy to how we do that repair early. Otherwise, when the dominoes are farther down, forget it. You have an uphill climb at that point. Let's address the early stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's bringing in the humanity. It's
Yeah.
not perfect. It's kind of
Yep.
awkward, and just bring in that humanity for us to be humans together.
Yeah. I know, Anne, I just want to single you out specifically. I get this comment a lot, and I know you get this comment a lot. I think I'm going to gas this up as women. Part of our professional success, you and I, is that I know you get this too. People say, you are who you are everywhere. You're the same person on stage as you are off. I feel your energy out to dinner with your friends as I do, so you and I are newer friends, and I have had a sense of your stage persona. And then you and I sat next to each other at the CSP summit and realized pretty quickly that we have the same sense of humor. But what I have learned about you, and I think why I'm so drawn to you, why I immediately believe you and trust you, is there's not, stage Ann versus friend Ann versus work Ann versus, of course, we all have to put on an optimized version for the room that we're in. I'm not being ridiculous. And the core foundational version, I believe immediately because you don't shapeshift, you don't change. And I get that comment a lot too, which again, when I get it, I'm both flattered, it's a compliment, and I'm like, doesn't everybody do that?
Yeah, that seems exhausting to try to change for everything, doesn't it?
Correct. And we don't mean to. I talk
Right.
about this in Good Awkward too. We don't mean to. It's a catering that we're trying to do to earn the respect and trust of peers. But what we're not factoring in is the cost, is the downside. There is a significant downside. And when believability is this fragile, it is made of glass these days. You really need to consider that contextual alignment as a strategic imperative, not just it feels good to be the same person everywhere. It's beyond that at this point.
Yeah. And such an important thing if we want to role model healthy human interaction in the world.
Correct.
It's an important piece. I love it. Good Awkward is the book you can get right now. The Signal Gap coming out in October. I can't wait to get my hands on it. That's October 2026. HennaPryor.com is a website. Henna, do you have any other pivots or exciting things coming up? I mean, not that a book isn't exciting enough. But
yeah, book.
What else is exciting?
People who write books know that it monopolizes your life for a while, but no, just a lot of travel. And, I think reinvention is fun. So every time there's a chance to explore new content, new work from new angles and do it in conversation with people like you, that's always going to be where my interest goes. So I just appreciate always getting to chat with you. And thank you for being oh so believable and having such congruent signals all the time, because it's people like you that give me hope for how it can be.
Well, and it attracts cool, fun people like you, and sitting, at a slightly awkward professional event, giggling our brains out immediately. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. This is such important stuff. And so I'm glad that you're sharing it with the world.
Thank you for having me.